people around the table. You need to make sure that all of those groups are represented and that it's equal representation. I mean that I don't mean that there's the same number of people from each different layer, but I think that you need to have equal representation across all of the sports when I say all of the sports from each of those bands, from high performance to participation. I think that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. I think you need to get, all the stakeholders as well. So, like views for instance, that if I was looking at it, say from my own work, if I was to develop a research strategy for anti-doping education, I wouldn't be just looking internally, I'd also be looking externally. So I'd be looking at what we do inside the anti-doping unit, but I'd also be actually really looking at getting views from all of the other people outside of the organisation that my work influences. So again, this is utopian, but education and health, they also have a huge, so you need to be able to, if you're doing research, you need to be able to say, right, well, how are we engaging with the external stakeholders? So I think that that's a really important piece as well, that it's not just looking at, like, there's no sense in researching the national sports policy, for instance, suggesting ways that we can change it. But if those suggestions are utopian or they're just not realistic because of the potential pitfalls from the Department of Education point of view, for instance, like the PE curriculum or something like that, that it's okay to do the research, but then ultimately it's not going to change behavior on the other side. So I think that has to be included as well.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing then is that it needs to be a collaborative, in that it needs to capture voices of across performance, high performance and participation. And it needs to be practical in its recommendations and in its plan, in its action.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things, again, I think that some of the times with research, particularly in this area, I think there's almost, maybe I'm wrong, but this is again just my perception, that it's almost as if there seems to be a need to have a number of recommendations. I'd rather if research had 2 or 3 recommendations and they were actually adhered to, rather than 10 recommendations that were sort of a willy-nilly approach with that. It was ad hoc. We'll apply it here, we won't apply it there.
Mm. Okay. And then on the flip side of that, Paul, have you ever picked up a strategy and gone, gosh, that's a really bad strategy? If so, what does a bad strategy look like to you?
Well, I have a problem with them in the first place. So, like, one of the things that I would seen from when we were in Camogie, for instance, is, these national development plans and that sort of stuff, and they engage with all the stakeholders. They do all that research piece, but then they produce this document, and it's a top level document. But then, and that's fine. You need the top level document for the sort of the higher administrative levels within each of the organizations. But you also need something that Joe Soap can pick up and actually apply it to themselves. So something that, like, the so what piece. So you get a strategy, or you look at a policy, and it's almost as if you go, yeah, that's all great. It looks beautiful, and it's always these, well designed, documents. They all look great. The information is great, but if you don't have something that, Joe Public can actually read, understand, and say, actually, yes, I can see how it applies to me, I think that bit is lost. And I think that there is this almost, we have to do a strategy, we have to do a policy, and it has to be this really flashy, high level